Those of you who are here, welcome. It's great to see you here in person. For those of you who are watching this video, welcome to you also. I think you all are going to really enjoy the presentation today. My name is Diana Tennis. I'm the family admin judge here in the Ninth Circuit. Happy to be here. I want to introduce you all, and Amy, I'm going to make you stand up and embarrass you. Amy Hamlin is the incoming president of the Central Florida Family Law Inn. And she took over the helm from me, and I could not be more appreciative. One of our wonderful sponsors today is our Family Wizard. We all know how important those tools are for families, and I'm going to let Rebecca Pera here introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Judge. It's so nice to be here again. I'm Rebecca with Our Family Wizard, but really I'm here for FLAFCC. So really I just was the lunch provider, but really the star of the show is the other Rebecca, who I've seen speak for FLAFCC at their conference in Lee County. You're in for she has a wonderful presentation. So I'm excited for all of you to hear it. Thank you so very much for having us. It is truly a pleasure. And I really hope to see everybody at the FLAFCC conference in October. Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to turn it over back to Judge Tennis.
All right. And Rebecca will tell you more about that. Very important. I'm going to plug one thing before I go. The OSCA, which is the judicial branch of the Florida judiciary, is partnering for, I think, the very first time with the Florida Bar, and they are taking a on-the-road show, a regional training on trauma-informed courts to various areas in Florida. The Orlando session will be on December 13th. That is a Wednesday. It's going to be at the hotel here nearby, whose name is escaping me, Embassy Suites. I think it's going to be amazing. We're going to have a lot of involvement here from local folks, but we're also going to have some of the judges who teach this and have taught this and are just groundbreaking when it comes to introducing us to ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and all of the things that we can do as a community, legal, lawyer, mental health professional, and beyond, to make sure that our courts understand trauma in families and in people and what that looks like and how we can make it better and not worse. So I invite you all to be looking out for my missives about that on December 13th. And without further ado, Rebecca Cantor, who I've heard amazing things about this presentation. I can't wait myself. Now, when I was first contacted about having this teaching about how to deal with difficult people, I thought, well, I don't have any of those in my courtroom, but I'm sure that other people might be so unlucky as to have these kind of challenging personalities. I don't know, but I think she's going to have a lot to give all of us. And being a lawyer and a mental health professional, very impressive. Here she is, the other Rebecca Cantor.
Thank you so much, Judge. So, hi, I'm the other Rebecca, right? But I'm always the other Rebecca, actually. And I hang out down in the 11th Judicial Circuit, which is Miami-Dade County, and the 17th, which is Broward. And occasionally I can be called up to the 15th if you really, beg and whatever. But mostly what I do is down in the Southeast Florida region. I sit on the board of the FLAFCC. If you don't know what that is, that's the Florida Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. And if you like the presentation I'm giving you today, wait till you see what we do in October. So October 4th through 6th, right around the corner, right down the street at the Orlando Conference Hotel. OSCA, if you're OSCA folks, if you're court staff, they pay for it. So, now maybe I'm going to go. Right? So it's great. It's really good. It's very entertaining. We learn a lot. It is higher order learning. The conference is not your grandfather's CLE. And paralegals, for those of you who have paralegals, they get all of their paralegal credit. And if you're a parent coordinator, we're giving 14 hours of training for the 16 hours you need for 2023. So lots and lots and lots of stuff. And of course, CJEs for our judiciary. So let's get started. I'm not good at standing behind podiums. I'm just going to connect my phone. Here we go. Okay, so who am I? All right, so I'm an attorney. I'm a licensed mental health practitioner. In fact, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, which sort of makes me a unicorn because I like to say it this way. I'm bilingual. I speak both legalese and therapy. So occasionally lawyers will receive like a psychological evaluation and it'll have a bunch of words on it and they go, what does this mean? And they get very excited, right? Adjustment disorder, not otherwise specified. That sounds fancy. And so I can sort of talk to the attorneys and say, this is kind of what that means. Alternatively, I can speak to mental health professionals who go, I got a subpoena, duces tecum. What does that mean? Like, okay, relax. I can tell you what that means. I can help you out. And so I do a lot of bridge work or liaison work between those two fields. I find that I spend a decent amount of time talking to folks on both levels, right? There's a lot of players in family law cases, and I find that I work with both of them. I primarily serve as a guardian ad litem, parenting coordinator, occasionally expert witness, occasionally consultation. I'm super excited. I'm being called as an expert witness in a Hague case next week, and I'm really jammed. Like, I'm super excited for that. So, nerding out. So that's a little bit about me. And then I also I'm in a private clinical practice called ThriveWorks. And so I also provide 15 hours of clinical services to folks who need mental health. So that's what I do. All right. And one of the things that I'm trained in, and I really think is super important is, and maybe you've heard of it, is dialectical behavioral therapy. Has anyone ever heard of that? 1. Yay, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So dialectical behavioral therapy is the only proven, right, empirically validated therapy that works for folks with borderline personality disorder. You may have heard of borderline personality disorder. We'll talk about that later. That's exciting. So I've been trained, I'm certified through Evergreen to do dialectical behavioral therapy and also to work with other personality disorders. So I've got that certification. DBT really makes a lot of sense for me. What I like about DBT, and then we'll kind of get into it. What I like about DBT is that it is proscribed. So much talk therapy is, well, how did it make you feel? Well, what do you think about that? Well, how are you feeling today? What are the, right? DBT is, here's what you need to do, which I love, right? Here's what you need to do. Like, here's your homework. You have to fill out this piece of paper every single day. And here are the things that we want you to try to achieve. And if this is happening, here's a prescription for how to resolve it. Like, I love DBT because give me what to do, right? I'm a law student. I can read a case. I can brief it. I got it. Don't ask me how I'm feeling. I don't know. I've got 6 cases coming up next week. I feel like I need help. DBT kind of is more prescriptive, which is part of what I like. Okay. But because I'm a DBT certified therapist, I like to start things with DBT. So we're going to do a mindfulness exercise. Oh boy, you don't have to do anything but sit and listen. It's not hard, I promise. So what I want everyone to do is kind of get into a relaxed position. Take a couple of breaths. It's Friday afternoon. Probably between now and 5 p.m., there won't be any emergencies. Probably. We hope. Everyone's on vacation, so we hope there won't be any fires. And so we're just going to relax and think about shutting our laptop, getting into the weekend. Everyone's relaxed. Okay. Here's a story about dandelions. A man bought a house and planned to create a beautiful garden. He worked hard and followed all the instructions in gardening books, but dandelions kept appearing on his lawn. When he first saw them, he thought simply pulling them out would suffice, but it didn't. So he used weed killer. It worked initially, but the dandelions returned. He worked harder, pulling them out and using more weed killer. They were gone, or so he thought. The next summer, they came back. The man thought it must be the type of grass he used for his lawn, so he spent lots of money and got a new lawn put down. It worked. He was delighted and began to relax in his lovely garden. But then the dandelions came back again. A friend told him the source of the dandelions was other people's gardens. So he called all of his neighbors and convinced them to kill their weeds too. They did, but the dandelions returned again. After 3 years of hard work and endless research, he was exasperated. He wrote to the Department of Agriculture. Surely they could help. Months later, an official-looking envelope arrived. At last. Excited, he tore open the envelope and read the letter. Dear sir, we have considered your problem and have consulted all our experts. After careful consideration, we think we can give you very good advice. Sir, our advice is that you learn to love those dandelions. Yeah. So that's a mindfulness exercise around acceptance. And part of what we need to do as practitioners in the law is sort of accept our clients where we find them. We can try to help them get better, but unless or until they choose to get better on their own, with help, with support, but that's not our responsibility, right? So we have to accept our clients and find the tools that we can use to help ourselves. And so that's sort of the purpose of this talk, right? How are we going to identify and meet the needs of our challenging clients to serve ourselves, to make them better, to make our cases better, to make them stronger? Nobody wants to go in front of a judge and lose. Nobody likes that, right? So how can you do? What can you do? So before we move on, I just kind of want to poll my audience. Do I have judges here? Who are my judges? Okay. And some magistrates. You guys count as judges. I call you your honor. You're all judges. You're all decision makers. Mental health folks? Any mental health folks in the room? Oh, welcome. You're in good company. We'll be friends. We'll help each other afterwards. We'll process. Lawyers? I should have a... Oh, also, are you also a unicorn? Are you a mental health and there's 2 unicorns in the state of Florida. I'm so excited. So this is going to be easy for you. You're going to love this. So, and everybody else who practices law, are you all family attorneys or multiple things? Just family? Criminal, commercial, complex litigation? Anything else that I missed? Okay. I just like to know who my audience is. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to talk today about 4 types of challenging clients. Right after there we go. There we go. I love this meme, right? What do we want? Clients, what do we want? We don't know. When do we want it? Now. Clients don't know what they want. They don't, right? So we're going to talk about 4 types of clients. We're going to talk about the clinically diagnosed with a robust mental health history. We're going to talk about folks who have emerging mental health issues or challenges adjusting to a new life status. We're going to talk about our traumatized litigant, and then we're going to talk about our VIPs, because they're special. So let me give you some of the boring stuff. This is some of what you're going to earn your CLEs for, right? Some information, mental health statistics in Florida. 41% of adults in Florida are reporting clinically significant symptoms of anxiety or depression. In case you haven't noticed, we're in the midst of a mental health crisis. I don't know if you've noticed. Have you noticed? Right? 2.8 million adults in Florida have a mental health condition. There are 180,000 children in Florida aged 12 to 17 who have depression, clinically significant depression. 64% of those children did not receive any mental health care in the past 12 months. We have some really big barriers to mental health care as well. It's national versus Florida. I'd like to see where we are in relation to the rest of the country. 24.7% of all adults with mental illness reported that they were unable to receive treatment in the last year. In Florida, that's 1.8 million adults. We are well above the national average. Hurrah. In 2021, 63.5% of adults could not access treatment for their mental illness. There might be some people here, right? This might be a controversial issue. We're going to talk about guns for a second, right? Second Amendment, all that good stuff. I'm not going to get into any of it. I just want to give you some of the facts. And the facts are that when there is the presence of a firearm, the likelihood of completion of suicide is very high. That's the facts, right? If a child can get access to a gun and is feeling depressed, a child can kill themselves, as opposed to a child having access to some other means to harm themselves, right? A gun generally equals fatality. So here's some of the numbers, right? In Florida, right, there were, I don't know, was that 3,000 deaths by firearm last year? Miami-Dade, just so you know where I'm coming from, 181 of those are homicides, right? But we had 101 suicides. Take a look at what's happening in Osceola and Orange County. The numbers are a little alarming, right? You're getting a lot more death by suicide and a firearm than you are homicide. So I just want everyone to be aware that that's what I'm talking about. Firearms are the #1 leading cause of death for American children. So when we're thinking about firearms in our family law cases, and I do, and I have them, and I do home checks as a guardian. Did anybody here serve as a guardian? Anybody do? Okay. Any of you ever checked for guns? Had to do it? Yeah. Yeah. I'm not making a judgment as to whether or not there ought to be a gun in the home. I'm making a judgment as to whether or not the gun is safe and the child is safe. So if you have a weapon, how is it stored? Can the child get access to it? Those are the questions. 50 years addressing the leading causes of death in the United States. That red line that's going straight up is suicide. That's the leading causes of death in the US right now. That yellow line, I don't know if you can see it. It's teeny tiny. I'll point it out. There's this yellow spike here, and then it drops way off. That's HIV. That's HIV/AIDS. So we have a national hotline. If you don't know it, you should know it. It's 988. It's been around since 2022. It launched in 2022. 988 is clever. It's good. It's good for the kids. If you've got kids in your cases, you need to let them know about it. 988 is text available because kids these days, they don't call. Have you noticed? Those of you who are guardians, when you're communicating with the children in your cases, you might be using text messaging or other social media apps. I use Snapchat a lot with the kids that I communicate with because they don't want to talk on the phone with me. They also don't want to talk on the phone with their parents. Who here has got that litigation issue? I can't have my nightly phone calls with my child. Yes, because your kid doesn't want to be on the phone. It's not because they don't like you. It's not because your ex is keeping them from you. It's because your kid hates being on the phone. Try a Snapchat. You will get an immediate response. I'm not kidding. It's amazing what I've resolved that way. Your Honor, my recommendation is the dad download Snapchat. I assure you. There's a thing, who here, are you guys familiar with social media? If I say Snapchat, it makes sense, you know what I mean? If I say Instagram, nobody's on Facebook under the age of 30, so don't bother, the kids are not interested. It's not a thing. There's some TikTok, it's falling off in favorability because Instagram has a thing called Reels, so it's better and you can monetize it better, and TikTok doesn't give you enough money if you're a TikTok creator, and the kids have figured that out. So on Snapchat, there's a thing, if you're guardians and you want to kind of get in with the kid, there's a thing called streaks, which you may or may not have heard of. Yes, people are nodding. Some people know what streaks is. You get points, right? If you snap each other every single day, and then you build up how many, right? What a great way to stay connected with the kids in my cases. They get a daily picture of my dog. Cool. And I get a picture of whatever they're doing. And if I don't like it, I call mom and dad or the judge. Clever way to keep track of the kids on your cases. Social media is more powerful than you think. So, more mental health statistics in Florida. I like to pay attention to the youth piece, right? This last one, so youth who did not receive treatment for a major depressive episode, it is going up. Again, a mental health crisis in Florida, in the US in general. All right, so this is specific to you guys, Osceola and Orange County. I looked it up. So there's, in Osceola, we'll start, there's 422,546 people here, in case you didn't know. 61.9 mental health professionals per 100,000 residents. In Osceola County, there are a grand total of 264 mental health providers. That's your number. It's not a lot. Sort of horrifying. 38 deaths by suicide in Osceola County, and 3,084 hospitalizations for mental health needs. I used to compare this, interestingly enough, as a side note, I used to compare this, because I've done this in Lee County and in Dade County and in Broward County, so I used to put in a note here about how many deaths were from COVID in the last year, to sort of just kind of get a sense of what's happening vis-a-vis mental health needs and see what it looks like against COVID. All of that data has been scrubbed off the Florida Department of Health. If you look up causes of death, and there's like a chart, like pulmonary, diabetes, blunt force trauma, COVID is not a choice anymore in the drop-down menu. So that's interesting. So here's what's happening in Orange County. You guys are a big county, 1.4 million people, almost 1.5 million people. You have 135.4 mental health providers per 100,000 residents. So you have a total of 2,025 mental health providers for 1.5 million people. That's also a little shocking. And 17,000 hospitalizations in Orange County in the last year. It's a lot of mental health needs. 16.6% of Osceola County adults have been diagnosed with a depressive disorder. 13.6% of Orange County adults have been diagnosed with a depressive disorder. I wanted another chart. I love charts. Another chart. This is mental needs assessments, and this is the suicide rate of children aged 12 to 18 in a bunch of different counties. Orange County is the yellowish line. Osceola County is the bluish line. Please take a look at the bright green line. That's Lake County. I don't know what's happening in Lake County, but that's 2004 through 2017. So I feel like I need to go to Lake County. Like, I'm a little bit concerned about what's happening in Lake County, but please note, children are very, very dysregulated. All right, so great, Rebecca, you've described the problem. That was fabulous. Awesome. Now we're all depressed, right? Now we're all gonna wonder, how am I gonna find a mental health provider? We've got problems. So who are you gonna call, right? So this is, again, my opportunity to tell you that the FLAFC conference helps answer a bunch of these questions. We have notions, we have ideas, we have solutions, we have practical results. It is a great conference. It's Wednesday through Friday. Now, you guys are down the road from Disney, but I sell it to other folks saying, come Wednesday to Friday, and then you can go to Disney or go to SeaWorld or whatever the next day. But please come. Please, please come. It's super, super helpful. You can reach us at flafcc.org or admin@flafcc.org. And sometimes I even get that email. All right, so let's talk about our litigants. Our first group is litigants suffering with potential mental health or adjustment issues. This is the one you send them out for a psych eval. I'm sure the judges have done this, lawyers have done it, they're desperate, something's wrong. Something's desperately wrong with this litigant. I'm gonna send them out for a psych eval. We need a psychological evaluation. And what you get back is adjustment disorder not otherwise specified. Does everybody know what that means? It means they're having a hard time right now. Okay, right? We think they'll feel better in about 6 months. Come back to us then. That's what adjustment disorder NOS means. Adjustment disorder, it's F43.20. Why do we give this diagnosis as mental health practitioners? Because if I don't give you a diagnosis, it isn't covered by your health insurance. So this is the lowest level diagnosis I can give you. There's another diagnosis. I see couples in my counseling, in my clinical practice, right? That's a Z code. Z60.0, interpersonal marital problems, not covered by insurance. Z codes are not covered by insurance. This is why parent coordination and co-parenting counseling is not covered by insurance. I got to diagnose someone. Then insurance will pay for it. That's what's happening on the back end, right? Okay, so adjustment disorder NOS is, this guy's having a hard time. She's just, something's happening. It's really tough. It's usually characterized by things like poor sleeping, poor eating, sort of poor management of day-to-day life. But generally, it does, in fact, resolve, right? Generally, people find their balance again. Divorce is awful. It right, feels like the ship is tipped over, and people need to find their way till the ship rights itself again. I remind you, right? We see some of the best people on some of their worst days. The client who comes into you and says, I think I need to get a divorce, my spouse is cheating, is having the worst days of their life, right? That is really hard. There's so much going on there that us as attorneys, you as attorneys, shouldn't have to unpack, shouldn't try to unpack, but be aware of it. Like, they're having a really bad, you do not hand them a financial affidavit. Go, here, fill this out. My spouse is cheating on me. I cannot fill out a financial affidavit. It's a terrible document. Only attorneys understand it. Have you noticed? It's awful. The other thing that's happening, and we see this sometimes with adjustment disorder, is some long COVID. And I mention it because I know many of us feel like COVID is in our rearview mirror, right? When I originated this lecture, it was pre-COVID. And when I've given this lecture before, I've done it with a mask, and I've also given it via Zoom. So now COVID kind of feels like it's in our rearview mirror, but it's not. And what's happening with COVID is two things. One, it is affecting people long-term, physically, in terms of their physical strength, in terms of their pulmonary abilities, in terms of being able to get out of bed. And then the other thing that's happening is mentally. Long COVID is definitely giving people a lot of brain fog. And so there's this psychological component as well. And so I mention it because we're going to see folks with long COVID for a long time. I'm old enough that I had cases with folks who had post-polio syndrome. And I feel like we're going to have folks 15 years, 20 years, 25 years down the road who are going to have post-COVID syndrome. So let's just keep our eyes on that. So our second folk is the clinically diagnosed litigant. So again, approximately 17.25% of Florida's population, and you're seeing folks with depression, anxiety, bipolar or schizophrenia, and personality disorders. I put personality disorders in their own box because they live in their own box, and we'll talk about that in a minute because they have a very special box. And research on personality disorders is actually a lot younger than research on the other mood disorders and the other mental health disorders. So, and the other thing, because we live in a post-Daubert era, when you're looking for your expert and your expert witness, and I ask the judiciary to keep this in mind when you're thinking about that Daubert standard. When we have a Daubert standard for people who are, let's say, traffic reconstruction experts, we're talking about 5,000 years worth of math, right? Like with Pythagoras, right? Math research goes way back to early Greek times. And when we're talking about medical expert witness testimony, we're talking about 4,000 years worth of medical research, right? We're hearkening back to Aristotle and, the Hippocratic Oath, right? Like medical research goes back 4,000 years. Mental health research goes back about 125 years. So it's still a very young field. And personality disorder research goes back to like the 80s when they moved personality orders into their own little section in the DSM-3. We're now on the DSM-5. But personality disorder research is really young. So when you're thinking about if someone rises to the level of being an expert in your courtroom, counselors the same. If you're thinking about bringing an expert to your case and you want them to rise to the level of an expert, keep in mind the research is very young and there aren't so many people doing personality disorder research. Right? There's Linehan who's doing the DBT stuff and she's amazing. And there's like a half a dozen other names. There's just not a lot of data and research out there. And what we have is good. Finally, it's really good. In the last 20 years, it's really gotten good. But it's not a long-standing, long-term thing. And I just want you to keep that in mind. We'll see substance use disorders, of course. I'm sure you all have seen that, have that. I've got a case right now where I've got a guy blowing in SoberLink 4 times a day. I'm monitoring it. And assuming that he's green all week, then he can see his kids. So there's lots of great tools around substance use disorder. It's really important to remember that substance use disorder is best thought of in being in the medical model, right? Substance use disorder is akin to diabetes. It's a systemic disorder. It needs to be managed and controlled for all time, right? They say, oh, I'm a recovering alcoholic. Well, yes, and it needs to be monitored and managed in much the same way that diabetes would be. And remove the stigma, right? A lot of folks who struggle with substance use disorder feel very, very stigmatized. They feel weak, right? When they have a relapse, they feel like something's wrong with them. No, right? Any more than somebody who goes into a diabetic coma, they didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't their fault. The same way with a substance use disorder, right? Treat it with compassion. It's a much nicer way to do it. The National Institute of Mental Health has advised the court systems of the US to treat substance use disorder as a medical condition in the medical model. So that's the advice from NIM. Okay. And a word about personality disorders. There's 10 total. You will probably see 4. You probably know the 4. I'm going to name them. You go, oh yeah, right. Narcissism, antisocial, borderline, histrionic. Those are the top 4. Those are the top 4 in the court system, right? That's what the research is telling us. Those are the top 4 in the court system. You'll probably see a lot more borderline and narcissism than you do of the other ones. Interesting research that came out about 10 years ago. They did a global survey of personality disorders. They surveyed 25 countries. It turns out personality disorders are remarkably stable around the world. About 15% of the world's population, somewhere between 12 and 15%, meet the diagnostic criteria for personality disorders. That's a lot more than we expected, but it's remarkably stable. In a clinical population, right, you're looking at somewhere between 50 to 100% of folks with a personality disorder. In a forensic population, a courtroom population, at least a quarter, at least 25% of the folks involved in the family court system or in any court system will meet diagnostic criteria for a personality disorder. That's 1 in 4 litigants. Yeah, that's a lot. Right? Some of you are like, no, it's my whole caseload. Everybody in my caseload. Fun things, borderlines and narcissists tend to come together. Giraffes do marry zebras. They're borderlines and narcissists. They tend to kind of hang out together. With the exception of antisocial, which I'll talk about in a second. The newest research and the newest empirical studies and the newest treatment models that are out are kind of remarkable. Turns out, I'm going to use a big word. Like, this is a big word, so get ready for it. Turns out that if the person is committed to it, we can cure a personality disorder. I said the word. I said, right? It's a lot of work. It takes at least a year, if not more. But if somebody wants to be different and wants to change, we can cure it. I won't get into all of the mechanics behind it, but there's some good, solid research that if you follow a specific treatment model, people can be cured. The exception to that is going to be the antisocial personality disorder. We're going to talk about that for one quick second because it's really important to me that all of you are safe. The thing about antisocial personality disorder is that they're motivated by exactly one thing, which is exploitation, and they lack exactly one thing, which is remorse, sometimes known as empathy. So a borderline personality disorder, not a borderline, an antisocial personality disorder can be super duper charming and super kind and conciliatory and appear to, right, they are very socially adept people, like amazingly adept. They're not doing it to be nice to you. They're doing it to use you. They have zero remorse and zero empathy. And if you get a psychoanalysis from someone that says that they have antisocial personality disorder, close the doors, close the windows, fire the client, make sure all of your information is offline. They can and would and will hurt you. You are in danger when there's an antisocial personality disorder hanging out in one of your cases. I cannot stress it enough. We had somebody shot and killed in Broward County a couple of weeks ago, an attorney, right? It's bad news. So if you see an antisocial personality disorder, throw up every wall you've got because it's important to be safe. So, what do you do when you've got somebody in your courtroom or in your office or on the deposition or whatever who's completely out of control? Super, 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 super anxious. We've seen these people. They stutter, they're nervous, they're shaking, they cannot think clearly, right? They're super, super, super nervous. Practical advice. This is called a tip. Yes, this is right out of DBT, but it works for everybody who is feeling really extra nervous. All right, TIP stands for 4 things. T stands for temperature. I stands for intense exercise. P stands for paced breathing or paired muscle relaxing. So here's what's happening when someone is super, super, super anxious. What's happening is, well, I guess I should go back and talk about the human brain for a second. You have this part in the back of your brain, your amygdala, sort of your prehistoric brain. That's the part of your brain that keeps you from being eaten by saber-toothed tigers. This is an important part of our brain. Manages anxiety, stress, tells you what to do, like, get out of the way, this is bad, right? This is important, right? Biologically speaking, super important. And then we have this section here called the prefrontal cortex. That's the logic part of your brain. That's the part where you're like, do I file a motion for a return of the marital property, or do I think I'm going to do it at final hearing, right? That's your prefrontal cortex doing this stuff here. It is a one-way communication street from your amygdala to your prefrontal cortex. Communication only goes this way, from back to front, because your amygdala needs to hijack your prefrontal cortex so that you can do something very quickly if danger arises. Makes sense, right? Like, you don't have to, well, should I go left or right if the saber-toothed tiger is coming at me? Like, no, you gotta go. It doesn't matter. You gotta go. So the amygdala does that. So when someone is super, super, super anxious, the amygdala has hijacked the prefrontal cortex, and they are no longer capable of logical thought. But the prefrontal cortex can't yell back to the amygdala, hey, buddy, calm down, it's just a deposition. There is no saber-toothed tiger in the room, right? The prefrontal cortex can't communicate that because it's one direction. So how do you get out of the hijack situation? You give the amygdala something else to do, right? You trigger what's happening back here in sort of a prehistoric way. So, tip, T, temperature. I do this all the time. It's great. It works so often. I know judges who are now have this on standby in their courtrooms. Hold a piece of ice to change the temperature. So, and I do it with Zooms. If I've got dysregulated clients in any of my Zooms, I see that they're super anxious. Can you just go to your freezer and get a piece of ice for a second? And I want you to hold on to the ice and notice how cold it is. It sounds ridiculous, right? Are you kidding me? We're going to solve this. We're going to solve anxiety with a piece of ice. Here's the science. You hold a piece of ice and you say to them, hold the ice and notice how cold it is and hold it until you can't hold it anymore. And what is the amygdala doing? You gotta let go. It's really cold. There's gonna be frostbite. Get rid of it. Yeah. So now the amygdala is paying attention to the ice cube and not paying attention to the anxiety-provoking situation. It does not take your anxiety from a level 10 to a level 0. It's not gonna do that, but it's gonna drop that person down a couple of notches. If you're at a 10 on anxiety, piece of ice is gonna get you down to like 8. Which then you can re-engage the prefrontal cortex. It's still stressful. Being on the stand, taking a deposition, that's stressful, but it's a little bit better, right? Lawyers, you can do this also if you've got like a stainless steel Yeti or tumbler, right? Hand it to your client, say, here, hold this. And it's just gonna calm them down a little bit. The other 3 work the same way. Intense exercise is generally not favored by the courts. So while burpees work, they're much harder in high heels. Not saying I haven't tried it. I'm just saying they're a lot harder in high heels. Broward County Courthouse, the old one, was 10 stories tall. And I used to be super, super anxious because I was a baby lawyer and I didn't know, and oh my God. And there were 2 elevators and they never worked. And inevitably, I had a hearing on the 10th floor. And I'd go in and go, yeah, I got 5 minutes to be in front of the judge on my motion to withdraw, but I don't know, I'm so nervous, right? So I take off my heels and run up 10 flights of stairs. I assure you I was much calmer in front of the judge. A little winded, but my motions were generally granted, right? So that's intense exercise. Paced breathing, you guys have heard about this, right, through lots of meditative whatever. Sometimes it's called box breathing, right? It's an in and out. And any way you choose to do your in and out is going to be okay for the purposes of this exercise. So I like to give people box breathing because it helps me imaginatively. So I tell them to breathe in for 3, then breathe out for 3, and breathe in for 3, and breathe out for 3, and you're sort of making a box. That's what box breathing is. But you could do 5s or 7s, and it could be in for 7 and out for 4. It doesn't matter so long as you're sort of following a pace. That's the same thing. And then pair and muscle relaxation, right? You've heard about people like, oh, you should just focus on each of your muscles and then feel them relax. Pair and muscle relaxation is a little bit different. You're going to use both sides at the same time. So for instance, you're gonna put this down. Right, I'll tell folks to make 2 fists. It's not enough to make 1 fist. You have to make 2. It has to be a pair of muscle. Squeeze it as hard as you can, as hard as you can, as hard as you can. Count to 5 and let go. You can do it. Anything you've got 2 of, you can do it, right? So 2 quads, however sitting in the courtroom or whatever, you can squeeze, curl your toes, but both feet, that sort of thing. That's a paired muscle relaxant. So what else can you do to support your mentally ill litigant? Well, you have to ask yourself some threshold questions. Right? That's great and practical in the courtroom. Thank you. Awesome. Great and practical in deposition. Awesome. Great and practical when you're trying to get a client to fill out a financial affidavit. I'm telling you, it's stressful. It's really stressful. So when you've got sort of this mentally ill litigant, you need to ask yourself a few questions, right? You have a couple of threshold questions. The first threshold question, of course, is can your litigant assist in the defense of their case? Can they be helpful? They don't have to know the law, but if you ask them how much is your FPL bill, they need to be able to answer that question. And if they can't answer the question, they need to be able to know where to go look to find out the answer to that question. I don't know how much my FPL bill is, but I know how to find it. Okay, I can assist in the defense of any litigation with me versus FPL, right? You need to ask, can the litigant function in day-to-day living? Anyone here ever have a litigant client potentially walk into your courtroom or your office totally disheveled? It is, yes, nods. Yes, it is clear they have not showered in days. Someone's going, oh, never. Nobody ever comes in with 2 different shoes and 1 sock, right? Yeah, right? So can they do their day-to-day living? Basic daily function. Can they comprehend what's going on? The nature of the litigation. Do they understand they're getting divorced? Do they understand that there's going to be a separation of property and that they're going to maybe, right, that these terms are that you're going to sign a quitclaim deed in favor of your ex who's going to refinance and buy you out of the house? Can they get that? Do they understand that when they sign that they don't live there anymore? Do they get it? Can they understand it? If no, if the answer to any of these questions is no, you need to stop the process and allow the litigant time to begin or regain their mental stability. I see a question. I'm taking questions.
In the criminal context, I know exactly what to do when my client doesn't understand those threshold questions, right?
Yeah.
But in a family law context, it's easy for me to say my client needs some time, but there may be deadlines looming.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there's a process the way there is in criminal to stop the proceeding.
I love the question. So the question is, I know what to do to stop the proceedings in criminal court, and that's pretty well prescribed. In fact, I included in your resource materials the administrative order here in the Ninth Circuit about what to do for that, because it's very clear. And you guys have the Ninth Circuit admin order over criminal proceedings and mental incapacity is fabulous, and the administrative order on mental health courts is amazing. So the short answer to the question is you need to think about getting an emergency temporary guardianship through the probate division. And then when you have an emergency temporary guardianship, and this is in your admin order actually for civil, you file a suggestion of incapacity. And a suggestion of incapacity is a tolling document. It tolls everything. It tolls all your deadlines. It tolls all your discovery. That's what you do. Now, I mediated a case a couple of years ago. It was kind of neat. It was a cool experience. It was an elderly couple. She had her children from her first marriage. He had his children from his first marriage, and then they had gotten married later in life. And he had lost his capacity. He'd certainly lost his capacity with respect to all things financial. Capacity, right? It's not black and white. It is a spectrum. He had lost his capacity to understand the financial implications of getting a divorce. He absolutely wanted a divorce. He was done with this lady. And she was done with him. It was mutual. Okay, fine. But he didn't have the capacity to enter into any kind of agreement or negotiation or trial around finances. So his adult daughter from his first marriage got a guardianship over him, which was fine, and got powers of attorney through the probate division. And they went to mediation, and his wife went to mediation. She had capacity. And we negotiated a marital settlement agreement. Well, I mediated. They negotiated a marital settlement agreement. And His guardian looked out for his best financial and legal interests, and he was represented by an attorney. So they worked together, so he was very well covered and very well represented, and that was great. And then, of course, the wife had her attorney, and she was represented, and it was great, and it was fine. And so we created a marital settlement agreement, settled the case. Technically, he didn't have the legal authority to sign off on the marital settlement agreement, which is awful. Talk about removing dignity. So, of course, I created a signature line for him on the document. And he also signed his marital settlement agreement. Then he was confused. He was like, so now I'm divorced? And we said, yes, sir, now you're divorced. Because he wasn't going to go to the final hearing. But for him, he got finality. He got the dignity he needed. He understood that his marriage was over in a level that he could understand. So the short answer to your question is you need to do an emergency temporary guardianship and file a suggestion of incapacity. There's a bunch of hoops around that. I'm not 100% sure what happens here, but that's the answer to your question. Yes, another question.
Okay, so that's great if you have crayons in the box. Our cases that we do are unrepresented litigants without means most of the time. What do you do there?
That's a good question. So the question is, it's great if you've got counselors and lawyers who are filing the things. What do you do if you have litigants who don't have capacity and they're pro se? And what do you do, right? And that's a really good question. So let's think about this for a second, because I've never had that question before. So let's think about it for a second. What is the responsibility of the judiciary to recognize when someone doesn't have capacity to proceed in their litigation? I think there's some responsibility on the part of the judiciary to recognize that the litigant in front of them is not connected to reality. And then what tools does the court have at its disposal to help folks get capacity? In Dade County, but people are shaking their heads. We got nothing up here. Oh boy. In Dade County, we have family court services. In Dade County, the judge signs an order referring the case down to family court services. It's on the 15th floor of the courthouse. It's amazing. People go downstairs, and it is a spot where all referrals are made for community mental health resources. It's awesome. It is not funded except by the lawyers in the 11th Judicial Circuit who think it's really important. But it's in a really important arm of the court. I'll ask a question to the members of the judiciary. Let's assume for a second, no, that's not, I don't have to ask this question. I don't have to ask it that way. Can you, as officers of the court, as members of the judiciary, can you extend deadlines for discovery and deadlines for hearings? Yes, probably, right? That happens as a matter of course. Someone comes in, I need another 10 days to file my responsive pleadings for discovery, da-da-da. So you might be able to hold the case on your own, put a note in your file and say, I really need you to go seek some mental health services. I really need you to go find some community resources. And we're not going to do anything today, and I'd like to see you back in 30 days and have a case management. That feels like kicking the can down the road. That doesn't feel satisfying to me at all. Sounds like it doesn't resolve anything. I'm agreeing with you, right? It's really challenging because I'm not sure what the answer to that question is. And you're not mental health folks, right? My members of the judiciary, so you're certainly not in a position even to do a spot assessment, right? As a therapist, right? Unless I'm assessing someone, I'm not assessing someone. But at least I could well, I get a feeling about this particular person in my chair. That's a really hard question. I think that's a question that needs more thought in the 9th and other places as well in Florida about how do we resolve that. Right? Because I don't like kicking the can down the road. I don't like saying, oh, well, we won't handle it today, because that doesn't mean it gets handled. So I'm struggling with that question. I wish I had a good answer. I wish I could, oh, here's what you do. Here's the, right? I don't have that solution. But I like the question. Yes?
So how does a lawyer do all that? Assuming as a lawyer, how does a lawyer or anybody else in the process do that without breaking confidentiality?
That's a great question. The question is about how do you do any of this without breaking confidentiality? Yeah. So the rules around confidentiality, right, but they're not finite, right? We have some wiggle room with respect to harm to self or others. We have some wiggle room around going to commit a crime. So we have some of that. I am imagining that some of your folks who are disconnected from reality may, in fact, be a harm to themselves or others. I always have, and I don't know if you guys have this, in all of my retainer agreements, I always have an emergency contact number. I always have a who can I call if I can't get you and something is going bonkers in the court system and whatever. So sometimes I'll call that emergency contact number and say without saying, hi, I met with your relative, whoever it is today, and I feel like they were struggling a little bit, and I just wonder if you've checked in on them recently. Which isn't saying much, but it is saying enough. So there might be some of that. Because that's a really good question. How do you do it without interrupting confidentiality? Right, and then we're talking about guardianships. Okay, so this is from my mental health professional in the room. We have a special request. I said this at the FLAFC conference last year, and I got a standing ovation from the mental health professionals in the room. Okay, so we think that this person needs some mental health services, and we're going to refer you out to a mental health community provider of some kind. Can you please tell us what you want us to do with the person who is now in our office? Because we don't know unless you tell us. Do you want a psychological evaluation? Am I the right person? I got a referral for a psych eval last week. That's great. I can't do them. It's not my licensure. I'm not trained. I can read them, but I can't give any of the tests. I can't administer the MMPI. I can't administer the WISC or the WISP. I got nothing, right? So yay, but I can't do that, right? So please, please, please tell us what you want. The same is true for attorneys. I had a case every week, every time I do this is I have a case last week, right? But this is for real. Actually, no, it's this week. I'm lying. It's this week. I got the call on Tuesday. I have a case. The mom's going to be psych eval. The dad's going to be psych eval. I'm the guardian. The psych evaluator called me and said, "What the hell is this order? What do they want me to do? And who's paying for it? And what? And yeah, they said my partner's going to evaluate mom, and I'm going to evaluate dad. Yeah, he doesn't do evaluations. And what do you want me to evaluate for? Are we talking about whether or not they can be with the children? Are we talking about substance abuse? Like, what do you want from me? So please tell the therapist what you want from them so that we can give you the information you are looking. Like, you are not referring us stuff for fun. But you're seeking specific information. Ask me what you want to know, and I'll go looking. But give me some direction and some guidance. All right, so here's incompetence versus incapacity. Here you go. They are different things. This is my big CLE slide because they're different. And the person, by the way, who told us that they were different, who wrote the original memo on they were different, is Janet Reno, when she served as the state's attorney. She and I had the same Publix. I used to see her every now and again. So she was cute. She'd go late at night so no one would notice, and I would go late at night because I like ice cream. And so, every now and again, I'd wind up in line behind her in Publix, and I never said hello, and I never said anything, and I let her buy her food, but I did check what she was buying. It was fresh fruit and vegetables. She's very healthy. But she wrote the original memo. There is a difference between incompetence and incapacity. And here's an extra little hook, which I worked on the case, so I know it to be true. I had a case many years ago when I worked at Legal Aid. I represented the mom who was a victim of domestic violence, and the violence was that her husband had shot her through and through. The bullet lodged itself in their child's spine. She was standing in front of the child so he wouldn't get shot. And so the husband was arrested and was being held for attempted first-degree murder, which makes sense. And while he was incarcerated, he lost capacity, because jail is a place where people lose capacity with alarming regularity. It's a bad place to be. If you walked in with capacity, chances are not good that you're going to walk out with capacity. So this guy had been found incompetent to stand trial for attempted first-degree murder. He was the petitioner. We were the respondent. And we're going to trial, and I get a call from the judge's bailiff. The judge would like you to brief and let him know when you come to trial on Monday next week whether if someone's been found incompetent in a criminal matter, can they be competent in a civil matter? Because he's going to have to testify that the marriage is irretrievably broken or he cannot grant the divorce. Oh. So here's what the judge did, because there's not a lot of case law on it, still none. Here's what the judge did. The judge made a specific finding. Here you go, judges. This was clever. He says, oh, by the way, this judge is now a federal appellate court judge. So one of the smartest judges I ever met. And he did it. So if he did it, you can do it. Judge made a specific finding that at the time of the filing of the petition, which preceded and predated his incarceration, he was competent. And so he absolutely had the capacity to say that his marriage was irretrievably broken at the time that he filed and signed the petition, which was notarized. So he granted the divorce, bifurcated on all other issues. But my client got divorced. So there's a clever little piece. Yes, another question. Yeah.
Actually, there's precedent for that too. In the 13th Circuit, like years ago, I was a staff attorney, and we had judges who were trying to sign off on cases without having to have hearings and stuff, just for paperwork. And it's convoluted, but you can find your way to that being a testimony. But then there's other cases that say no, that you have to have them in person. So I've seen it done, but I don't know if it's.
So
So
I was a legal aid attorney in 2000. So that's when it was happening for me. The comment is about how in the 13th, they're trying to do it a little bit paper-free. We do it a little bit in the 11th now, post-COVID, where you can just send in your paperwork and the judge signs off on the final judgment, which sort of precludes the need for some testimony. And so the question is kind of which came first, the chicken or the egg, because you can get to that result based on pleadings. And of course, then the burden relies on the notary to make sure that the person signing the affidavit has capacity. So that's going to be an interesting question. It gets complicated. Story time. I tell a lot of stories, but this one's near and dear to my heart because I want you to see what happened and how it happened. This is one of the most tragic things I had the honor and privilege of working on. And this is where mental health folks kind of find themselves in interesting places if you give us the opportunity to do it. So I have two friends who are both family law attorneys in the 11th Circuit. I've had cases with them in the past. They're great attorneys. They get along well with each other. We love it when when attorneys get along well with each other. It makes it so much easier, doesn't it? When you get along well with your opposing counsel. Yeah. Okay. So here's what happened. Second marriage for a husband and a wife. He had children from his previous. She had children from her previous. And she was diagnosed with terminal glioblastoma, which is awful. And he took her to the hospital because she was having seizures and got this devastating diagnosis. While she was in thralls with treatment and things in the hospital, her daughter from the prior marriage got powers of attorney and a guardianship over her mom, who had clearly lost capacity because of glioblastoma, and filed for divorce. And she wasn't going to survive the divorce proceedings. But the daughter, who got power of attorney, brought her mom home to her house and refused to let her stepdad say goodbye to his wife as she lay dying, because she came home on hospice. So here's a gentleman, it's the love of his life, did not want to get divorced, and he couldn't say goodbye. So the lawyers called me, and they said, what do you think? Like, can you help in some way? And I was like, what are you thinking? So I was hired to conduct supervised visitations. I met the dad at his stepdaughter's house and escorted the husband in to see his wife, who was totally non-responsive, dying, so he could spend a couple hours with her and say goodbye. And we did 3 supervised visitations. And it sucked. There was nothing about this that was good news. There was nothing about this that wasn't anything other than a tragedy. And of course, all of the fallout that comes of it, right? These were step siblings who had grown up together, his children from his first, her children from her first. Now they're not on speaking terms. It was very much a ploy by the daughter of the previous, of the mother, to try to get hold of the marital property. It was very clear that that's what was going on. By the time I got involved, what was going on was an imminent death. She ultimately passed, right? So the property passed as the property passes, right? There was no other choice. But it was tough. It was tough to sit there. It was tough to be part of it. I'm glad that I gave him an opportunity to get some closure. But it was a tough experience. And what we're seeing, and you may have seen this like in your headlines of USA Today or whatever, is we're seeing an increase in the gray divorce, which is divorce over the age of 65, because 65 is the new 45 as life expectancy gets longer. I'm saying it like in jest, but it's true. As life expectancy gets longer, folks are getting to 65 and going, nope, I do not have another 20 years in me. Can't do it, right? And so they're seeking divorce, right? We waited until the kids were grown and gave us grandchildren, and the grandchildren are grown, and now I cannot wait around for greats. I can't do it. Right? So we're going to see more and more of these kinds of things. All right. I love this meme. Guys, I'm here. I just forgot my sheet. I found it in Halloween. I just love it. All right. So if your client, right, if those threshold questions, the answer to them is yes. Yes, my client can assist in defense. Yes, my client can manage day-to-day living. Yes, my client knows what's going on. What else do you do, right? You're going to look for community resources. And the first question you're going to ask your client is, do you have a doctor? When was the last time you saw your doctor? A lot of medical conditions manifest as mental health conditions. Hypertension can look like anxiety. You might have high blood pressure. So the first step is go see your doctor. It's actually the first question I ask in my clinical practice when I'm doing my intake and they're telling me, well, I'm really nervous, I'm not sleeping at night, and da-da-da-da. Really? Do you find you have frequent urination? Like, I asked the question. And when was the last time you saw your doctor? These are important questions, right? It really makes a difference. Ask if your client has a village. Who are your people? Are they church people? Are they a book club? Are they your golfing folks? Like, who are your people? Who are you spending time with? I'm in a great little group. I love my little group of girls. We meet every couple of weeks. We bring our little handicrafts with us, right? I have to replace buttons on jeans, and in my spare time, I crochet baby hats for the NICU. That's our group. We all do like little sewing projects, and we call ourselves Stitch and Bitch. That's what we do. I love my group. That's my heart of my village, right? And then, of course, does your client have a therapist? Everybody should be in therapy. If you're not in therapy, you should be in therapy. Every therapist should be in therapy. It's really, really helpful just to have a neutral third party who can't tell anybody anything about you call you on your stuff. Right? That's a useful thing to have. Let me poll the audience. For whom does this picture make a lot of sense? I don't know how to have boundaries. Yeah. All right, so here is the magic key to boundaries. Boundaries are not for the other people. Boundaries are for you. You set your boundaries, you create them, they belong to you. If other people cross them, that's going to be their problem, not your problem. Here's an example of a boundary that I have in my life that makes perfect sense. You should all have a boundary similar. This is my iPad. It's a toy. I use it to look at Instagram. I use it to look at social media. I use it to go shopping. Ask my husband, who's here in the front row. Hi, honey. I spend all night, not all night, but many nights shopping. My title for the FLAFCC is I'm the board shopper. I love to do it. It's super fun. My iPad is my toy. I read books. I do. I read some books. Right? My iPad is my toy. It is a toy. And I only play with it at night when I'm done working for the day. So do you know what the boundary is? No email. I cannot get work email on my iPad. I disabled it because it's my toy and I'm not doing email late at night. Who here is checking their phone at 2 o'clock in the morning? Get up to pee, look at your phone. Yeah, guys. If I give you no other information today, right? The information is turn your phone, put it on airplane mode. If you feel like you have to push the button to see what's happening at 2 o'clock in the morning, go on airplane mode, right? Set a boundary. And if you have a client who's emailing you at 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to know about it. And even if you say to your client, which some of you do, I have in my retainer agreement for parent coordination that my office hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and that's when you can expect to reach me. Right? People call at all times and they email at all times. Yeah, that's their problem. It's not my problem. I told you when you can reach me. Right? I'm sorry you couldn't follow the rules is sort of the answer to a crossing of a boundary question. So be in that place. So I know you guys are going to get some information about trauma in the future, but let's talk about, is that it? No, let me go back. Let's talk about trauma damn it, hold on. I got too excited. I only had 2 cups of coffee, I promise. Okay. So I teach Zumba twice a week. That's part of like my self-care. It's super fun. I have 50 women aged 50 plus in my Zumba class. And they get very nervous when I tell them I had 3 cups of coffee today. And they're like, no, can you dial it? Can you switch to decaf, Rebecca, please? All right, so your traumatized client. People who suffer from trauma in early life bring that forward. They bring that experience forward. They will see things and they will see threats that maybe you don't recognize or think are very illogical, but they bring it forward into their life. And of course, you can't take back the clock and you can't help them with their trauma. And you also can't help them get over the trauma because you're not mental health professionals. And even if you were, if you're not in that role, you can't go beyond your role. You have to do, right, only what you can do to stay in your lane. But it's really beginning to manifest itself, and we're really beginning to understand that we can be better practitioners of law if we come from a trauma-informed place. If we can understand what's happening with litigants and why litigants are responding the way that they respond. It's based, some of it, a lot of it is based in ACEs. Who here's heard of ACEs? So this is review for many of you, but for new folks, we'll give you the primer, right? ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's super fun to Google, and you can take the ACEs test. It's 10 questions, and you yourself can score yourself and see how many adverse childhood experiences you've had. It's kind of an interesting thing. Certainly helps you understand some of your risk factors, right? So adverse childhood experiences are experiences that create strong, frequent, or prolonged activation of the body's stress response system. Strong, frequent, prolonged activation of the body's stress response system. So it's not, right, like I was in a car wreck, which is awful and traumatic, but that's not an ACE. It would be if I was in a car wreck every Thursday morning, right, because that's a pattern. So when we talk about ACEs, we're talking about things that happened over time, many times over, that create a stress response in the body, specifically in the childhood body, right, in a child's body. So we are looking at things like children who are witness to repeated domestic violence. We're looking at things that children who are witness to parents who use substances and abuse substances. We're looking at children who maybe bounced around through a lot of foster homes, right? So those are the kinds of things we're looking at and thinking about when we think about ACEs. As a result of ACEs, and this is a biological thing, as a result of ACEs, as a result of triggering the body's corticosteroid response, you trigger a lifelong biologic response and a lifelong biologic pattern, which impacts negatively someone's overall health. It's pretty significant. People who have a high ACE score, you can have a score between 0 and 10. You don't want to have a 10, right? That 100% is a really bad number. You really want to be in the 0 to 1 range. Experience one or three things, two of which we know: fight or flight. But the third thing that the traumatized litigant does is freeze. And what freeze looks like on the stand is lying. What freeze looks like in deposition is being cagey. And that's not what's happening. Your client's stuck in the loop. The amygdala has hijacked the prefrontal cortex. They're frozen because they were traumatized. And you say, well, sir, how much is your FPL bill? And he goes, well, I don't know. And, I don't have to tell you that information. And, why would you want it anyway? That's not belligerence. If it's a traumatized client, that's a traumatized client. But it looks to us as rational observers as belligerence, as lying, as being evasive, as being cagey. That's not what's happening. Your client froze. The litigant froze. Hand them an ice cube, right? Because then you can kind of disengage that amygdala and re-engage the prefrontal cortex, right? It's okay. It's a safe answer to talk about your FPL bill. And you don't know what they're going to respond to, right? For some people, an FPL bill, I say, because it sounds absurd. Who gets mad and belligerent over an FPL bill? It is what it is. I have the lights on. That's the thing. Yes. Thank you for that. The comment was about the impact of socioeconomic trauma. And yeah, there's a lot of impact around socioeconomic trauma. There's that study out of Philadelphia is really great in demonstrating that. Socioeconomic trauma, of course, is if you, as a child, are wondering about where you're going to eat and if you're going to eat. And you and as a child don't have appropriate clothing or shoes, right? That's a real lifelong trauma because it comes with so much stress, which again is prolonged, sustained, right? Will absolutely have an impact. Here's how ICES impacts your body, right? So if you take 100 random Americans, right, 33 of them are going to have no ACEs. Of your folks with no ACEs, 1 in 16 of them are going to smoke. 1 in 69 of them are going to be alcoholic. 1 in about 500 are going to use IV drugs. 1 in 96 are going to attempt suicide, right? And heart disease. 1 in 14 has heart disease. General American population with no ACEs. 16 of your random 100 Americans, I feel like Family Feud here, 16 of your random Americans who have 4 or more ACEs, 4 to 8. I don't think I've seen anybody with 10. That would be institutionalized, I think. But folks with 4 or more ACEs, right? Look at the number on heart disease. Look at the risk on heart disease. And they controlled for everything else. It's just the ACEs that are doing that. Look at the alcoholism. Look at the suicidality. If you have a traumatized client, you have an at-risk client. If you have a traumatized litigant, you have an at-risk litigant. You might be dealing with trauma if you ask, what is wrong with this guy? Right? Someone's like, oh, I ask that about every single person who walks in my office. What is wrong with you? Right? Yeah. What's the question you should ask? What happened to you? That's the trauma-informed question. You can think it in your head. What is wrong with this guy? question you want to ask is, what happened? Help me understand what happened. You as lawyers are not going to be able to write that justice necessarily, particularly if it happened in childhood and you're getting them divorced right now. But boy, does it help you think about the questions you're going to ask in deposition. Boy, does it help you think about how you're going to craft your opening and closing statement if you're wondering about that. Traumatized client is that frozen client who needs a lot of support to speak in court. Traumatized litigant's going to get in their own way. Who here's got that? Yeah, nods all around. Yup, right? Fill out this financial affidavit, and they don't. And you're 45 days late on discovery, and you're 100 days late on discovery. They get in their own way. They really do. You can also get in the way of your traumatized client. So here's some tips for practices for you, attorneys in the room, right? You get in the way of your traumatized client if you are missing and constantly rescheduling meetings. This is also true for all personality disorders. Personality disorders reside in a place of chaos and ambiguity. This is also true of judges when you reschedule hearings. We as lawyers, by the way, we hate that. It takes us 90 days to get a hearing in front of you, and then you have to reschedule it. And sometimes you do, I get it, like, it's fine, there's an emergency. Life happens to judges as well as to everybody else. But when personality disorders and traumatized folks who live in the realm of chaos and ambiguity get chaos and ambiguity from the system, you've gotten in their way. So you really want to be sure that you're dead on. If I tell a client I'm meeting them at 10:30, I'm meeting them at 10:30. It's happening. Not 10:31, not 10:29, 10:30, right? If you're tardy, right, that gets in the way. If you, as the professional, engage in poor self-care, if you yourself are dysregulated, if you yourself are trying to work through some trauma, that gets in your way. This is a hard thing to gauge, too nurturing or too pushy, right? Like, you want to hold your client's hand and hold your client's hand, but at some point your client has to learn how to write a check to FPL. You can't do that for them. That's being too nurturing. On the other hand, you got to fill it out, you got to fill it out, you got to fill it out, or I'm withdrawing. That might be too pushy. It's hard to kind of navigate that, but that's important for us to do as professionals. Not assigning homework. It's my favorite thing to do as a clinician. It's one of my favorite things to do when I used to represent grown-ups. I don't do that anymore. I only do parent coordination, which is my favorite thing to do, and guardian ad litem, which I don't give kids homework because I'm not mean. But when I used to represent adults, I gave them homework. It didn't matter what it was. Gave them homework. I need you to do XYZ thing and get back to me. And get back to me by a deadline. I need you to contact a therapist. I need you to find a home appraiser. I need you to go to Zillow and look up rental properties. It doesn't matter. Give them a homework assignment because they need to be invested in their case. Not seeking supervision. Therapists do it all the time. Right? I had a crazy case. They're all crazy. I had a case where I was really disturbed about kind of what the marital settlement agreement was going to be with respect to time sharing with the child. I just thought it was not in the child's best interest. I was really distressed about it. So I called a colleague and said, what do you think? I called a fellow guardian ad litem and said, what do you think about this? Am I off track, right? The Florida Rules of Professional Conduct, this is where you get your ethics CLE. The Florida Rules of Professional Conduct require you to seek supervision if you are dealing with an issue you don't know or you don't understand. So if somebody walks into your office and you've never done a criminal case before and they have a criminal matter, like, we know we're supposed to go call, you can do the case, but you know you should call another criminal attorney and say, how do I do this? The same is true for novel issues in family law. And we're about to have 100 million of them because they changed the alimony statute. And we don't have any guidance from any appellate division yet. So we're all going to be kind of walking through the quicksand together. So call your friends, because we don't know. It's a group we don't know. If you overpromise or underdeliver, that's good business practice, by the way. You should always underpromise and overdeliver from a good business practice, but it's also a good litigation strategy. Underpromise and overdeliver. Remember that tip? There's your ice cube. I had to look really hard for that ice cube picture. I have another brain hack. Because sometimes people are super, super, super anxious and they're really, really, really nervous. And sometimes they're really, really, really mad. Everyone see anger in the courtroom? Right? Occasionally with people like jumping up and trying to get to the judge. That's terrifying. I've seen that happen. That's pretty awful. Or your litigant's really mad and they're like hitting your arm. They want to say something. People are nodding their heads. You guys have seen people are mad, right? Or you're mad. Your opposing counsel's a jerk. How dare my opposing counsel say such? You're mischaracterizing what I said to you, right? Like the lawyers get just as hot. Don't think for a second it's just lawyers get hot. Man, we are wired tight. Okay, so here's the brain hack. It's called giving hands. Looks like this. That's it. That's the whole hack. We don't know why it works. I can't tell you the brain function. I cannot tell you the brain function behind why that works. If you are mad, if the person is mad, you make them do giving hands. The angry person does giving hands. Right? If only. If only. So we have empirical data that it works. This is coming out of Marsha Linehan. We have empirical data that it works. We don't have the brain science on why. But you can do it in a variety of formats. Yes? So that's interesting. The question is it maybe anthropologically related? Because if you had a closed fist, you could be suggesting violence, and if you had an open hand, you were suggesting that you were unarmed. The other side of that is in many other cultures around the world, an open hand can also could be a sign of aggression. Not everybody closes their fist to strike. So anthropologically, maybe not, because we don't really know. Yes. Oh, interesting, right? So there's a trauma you might need to, right? That was a repeated trauma over time with a sustained, right? So we don't actually know why. We just know that it does. In the same way that a tip skill will take an anxious person from a 10 maybe to an 8, giving hands is going to take you from a 10 maybe to an 8. It's not going to take you all the way down. Yes, it has to be both hands. No, you don't have to stand in front of the judge like this. I don't know if there's a mirroring. Here's what we ask litigants to do. Here's what I ask litigants to do, right? You're sitting at the table. Put your hands on your lap. Nobody can see what you're doing, right? Nobody, right? If you're on the Zoom, but just put both your hands face up. It's the face up motion. We don't know why. Yes. Yeah. So my clients don't want help with their mental health. That's not why they're here to see me. I'm their attorney. They're here for me to win their case.
I mean, don't get me wrong, many of them want too much help with their mental health from me.
Yes.
But there's a whole other section of them that do not believe they have any mental health issues and do not want me involved in them.
Yes. So I have clients who absolutely positively, you're my lawyer. Don't tell me to go see a therapist. I'm fine. Right. Those folks. Yes. Right. Those folks exist. And part of what we're learning today is what you are going to do with those folks. Right. Part of it is, and I've done this, right? And many of you guys have done this. If you're attorneys, right, you say to your client, here's how you behave in front of the judge. Because do you want to win your case? Do you want your kids? Do you want to not pay alimony? You can't get pissed in front of the judge. So you can teach your client, right, I'm going to tell you to do this. I'm not going to tell you why. I'm just going to tell you to do this. And you got to chill out, man. It's going to be better for your case. And that's 100% true, right? And you're going to sell it that way. Judges, there's no reason why you can't make people do that in your courtroom, right? All right, I need all of the attorneys and all of the litigants to put both palms up and take a breath. And you don't have to explain why. It's your courtroom. You own the place. You can do it. Okay, so let's talk about our VIPs. Our VIPs. You know them. They take up a disproportionate amount of your time as compared to other clients. All of your clients are needy. Your VIPs are extra needy. You are all nodding your heads. You all know exactly which ones of your clients you're thinking of. You're like, oh yeah, Joe Smith, Jane Doe, right? They will call you and email you and call you and email you and call you and email you until you respond to them. And their issues are generally pretty petty. I once litigated the return of Kraft fat-free French dressing. You know, you practice law long enough, you get all kinds of stories. So, right, we negotiated. The husband was moving out of the marital home. The mom left for the weekend. He was going to gather all his stuff. It was fine. She went. He got his stuff. I got a call Monday morning. Of course, I got a call Monday morning. There was a list of things. Of course, I got a call Monday morning. She took the Kraft fat free. She took the dressing. She took the dressing. I'm like, the what, sir? She took the salad dressing. I'm like, was it in a crystal carafe? Like, what? What dressing? She took the Kraft fat-free French dressing. The what? So I said to him, sir, do you know how much you pay me per hour? And for the cost of this phone call, you can have 5 brand new Kraft fat-free French dressings. So I'm going to not charge you, and you're going to go to the store. Welcome to your VIPs, right? So who are they? They're very irritating people. I write VIP on their file. They think they're special. Everybody else in the office knows what it means. These are your VIPs, right? You all are smiling. You feel a whole lot better about it. Every one of you is like, I'm going to write that down now. I'm going to put VIP on their file, and I'm going to laugh every time they call. I'm going to input them in my billing system as VIP, and my paralegal's going to laugh too. We're going to have a little joke. That's good for you. That's good self-care. Be in that place. I encourage it and I support it. Don't let the client know, but I encourage it and I support it. Right? VIPs, your response is, this guy again? Right? I can't file a motion on that. That's ridiculous. And I roll. Right? Anybody here old enough to remember the video game Snood for computers? Yes, right? Snood was like a block game where you're trying to destroy 3 blocks at a time for colors. It was, right? Snood was great, right? I knew I had a VIP when they would call and I would open up Snood while we talked, because I was going to do that. Right? And how can I let my client know he's wasting his money? Right? These are your VIPs. If you have a VIP or a traumatized litigant, the way you're going to help them is roughly the same. This is what you're going to do for you and for them. You need to assess, who can your client call when there is a crisis? She took the Kraft fat-free French dressing. Right? He bought the wrong car seat. Did that one. He has a Graco car seat from Costco, and he needs to have the $500 Britex car seat. Yeah, nods of heads, yeah? Right? Who's your client going to call for that? Because you are not litigating that. Because a car seat, as long as it meets federal safety regulations, doesn't matter where it comes from, it doesn't matter how much it costs, as long as it's not expired and it meets minimum federal safety regulations, is an adequate and appropriate car seat, and the judge is not going to make him buy a Britex car seat. You know this, I know this, the client doesn't know this. So who are you going to get the client to call in the event of a crisis? Who will help your client create helpful and productive communications to their former partner? We love Our Family Wizard. Thank you, Rebecca, for being here for Our Family Wizard. Everybody here know Our Family Wizard? Yes, we love Our Family Wizard. Do we know why we like Our Family Wizard better than Talking Parents? Who here knows Talking Parents? All right, do we know why you like Our Family Wizard better than Talking Parents? Because third parties can't look at Talking Parents in real time. Talking parents, right, remains encrypted, and you can get the information, right, with no changes. That's great. That's wonderful. It's good for judges, like, because you guys aren't going to read it in real time. Judges are going to get a PDF printout of these talking parents messages. Our Family Wizard, your parent coordinators and your guardians ad litem, we can log in and read it in real time. That's what I do on Friday mornings. I see it, I'm not kidding, cup number 3 of coffee and my wizards. I say, what's going on? How did the weekend? Do I have to call anybody before noon? Right? What's the current issue? So our Family Wizard is great for monitoring communications. Our Family Wizard has the tone monitor that asks, are you sure you want to send that message? Like, it has some way of understanding if people are writing mean stuff. You can still say yes and send mean stuff. And so sometimes the question is, and I've helped some folks on this, like, how do I craft better communications to my ex? So maybe you're going to help your VIP get that. Sometimes your VIP, by the way, is the person with the personality disorder. Yeah, and they need it, right? So you sell it to them with, you want to win? You got to work with this person to do better, right? Who's going to assist your client in feeling heard? The number one thing that litigants are going to tell you, and they tell us judges, the number one thing that litigants feel is that they are unheard by the court system because you don't have time to hear it. Like, you don't. Like, you literally don't. You have too many cases. You have too much going on. You need just the facts, brass tacks. I need to make an immediate decision. I don't have time to hear about your trauma from 25 years ago. But the client needs to be heard. Otherwise, they really struggle with moving on and moving into the next phase of whatever it is. So who's going to be the person that hears your client? Who's going to be that person? In other words, who's going to assist you in assisting your client? I do this in some of my cases. I act as a consultant, right? We've trained the problematic litigant to call Rebecca first before you call the judge, before you write that nasty note to your ex. Call Rebecca first. And Rebecca takes time to really get to know the client ahead of time, really understand the trauma history, really be helpful. Now, it's not super affordable for a lot of folks, but it is important to find your resources. Yes, Judge.
Okay, so to Jennifer's point, what if we call you that doesn't sound mental health-ish?
Consultant.
I like it.
Consultant. I have a consulting agreement.
I feel like Judge Pence is about to order consultants to call.
All right, Judge, put in a lot of consultants. Am I close to time? Okay, thank you. Let's see how close I am on my PowerPoint. We might run over a little bit. Oh, no, actually, I'm actually pretty close to being done. Yay, me. It's nice when you can get the timing just right. Okay, so stuff for you all, because it is of paramount importance to me that the people that I work with are safe and secure. Right? And many of you might think that you're totally invincible. Like, it's fine. I can walk out to my car by myself. I can go do a home visit by myself. Anyone doing guardian work where you're going out and doing home visits? Right? Oh yeah, I can go to my car. I can drive myself to my home visit. It's fine. Like, no big deal. No. And here's how I tell you that you believe me. You are the only son, the only daughter, the only father, the only mother, the only spouse, the only sibling that your other person has. My kids have one mom, that's me. And I don't want their mom to be in trouble or hurt or unsafe. So think about it that way and consider your safety. We had an attorney shot and killed in Broward County a couple of weeks ago. It's awful. I have a case about a year ago that I was the guardian, and the attorney for one of the parents kind of stopped responding, stopped answering emails, which didn't make sense. She was super responsive, very helpful, great attorney to work with. I discovered several weeks later that she had died by suicide. It is important to be safe. When I talked about at the top of the hour about all of the statistics for all of the folks suffering with mental health, it is not just the litigants. It is your colleagues. It is your family. Right? So it could be you. Attorneys, we are not doing well as a group. We are wound real tight. We are type A personalities, and we don't think we need help. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. Because it turns out we're also human. So it's important to care for yourself. So here's some weird psychological psychobabble stuff, right? Transference and countertransference. What does that mean? The short version of it is, if my client's stuff is my stuff or their stuff, looks like this. You're talking to your client, and your client is a child of an alcoholic father, and you also are the child of an alcoholic father, and so now everything that you assume about your own childhood experience, you assume was his childhood experience, which may or may not be true. Or you discover that your client is an alcoholic father, and you are the child of an alcoholic father, and you think your alcoholic father was a jerk, and so now you think the client is a jerk. That's that putting your stuff onto somebody else's stuff. So it's important to remember that everybody has a unique world experience. And your experiences inform you and give you good strategies and give you good ideas, but it's not the same as anybody else's. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to your professional responsibility and your professional liability. Right? If you're walking somebody through a divorce and they are incompetent to do it, how much of that is malpractice? How much of that is a bar complaint? So pay attention to that as well. If you haven't read or aren't familiar with the bounds of advocacy, I recommend that you become familiar with it. It's a great handbook on how to treat each other professionally and kindly within the practice of law. So it's a lawyer book for the lawyers, bounds of advocacy. And then safety precautions. I'm not kidding. Particularly my guardians who are traveling around. Tell somebody where you're going to be. Have a safety plan. Have an escape route. This is a trick I like a lot. I tell people this a lot, particularly if you've got some issues of domestic violence. Judges, you should do this for sure. Turn your phone off or turn it into airplane mode when you're in the courtroom, or when you're with the other side, or when you're going to meet someone at a third-party location. Because it is incredibly easy for someone to install malware on your phone and then be able to track you. And people do it. The program costs about $50. It's not hard. And in this day and age, right, we are less safe than we were a decade ago and much less safe than we were 25 years ago. Somebody needs to know where you are. They need an address. Pin your location on your phone. Put your phone on Bluetooth. Turn it off in the courtroom. Not just, right? This is for you lawyers, right? You don't want your phone to have a notification on anyway. The last thing you want in the middle of cross-examination is your phone to ring, right? In Dade County, if your phone goes off in court, you've donated it to the domestic violence shelter. The judges are very hardcore about that. But okay, so you put it on silent. But if you've got an opposing litigant who's dangerous, he or she could be getting into your phone while you're busy giving opening statement. Turn your phone off before you get inside the courtroom. Bluetooth is about 25 to 50 feet, right? So think about that. Self-care, right? We give it a lot of lip service, but it's really a thing. It's really important. We know that when we experience stress, it's bad for us. We know that it manifests in a biological way. We know that it increases heart attacks, heart disease, cancer. It exacerbates illnesses, all of those sorts of things. Self-care is really critical. How you choose to do self-care is up to you. Everybody does it differently. I'm in Orlando at least once a year because I am a perfect princess. I run the Princess Half Marathon at Walt Disney World. It's adorable. I wear a tutu and a tiara, and then I run 13 miles. It's super fun. I've run all 15 of them, and I'll be running my Sweet 16 this year. Super awesome. And you heard, I teach Zumba twice a week because I apparently I'm part Chihuahua. Right? I need to move and groove, right? What you choose to do is up to you, but you do need to pay attention to how you're eating. You absolutely need to pay attention to how you're sleeping. So important, right? If you get 4 hours of sleep a night for 5 nights in a row, you are a drunk driver. The data tell us this. Your reflexes are as if you're 6 beers in. Sleep is critical. I'm waiting for some of those liability cases about like he hadn't slept in 5 days And right now it's vehicular manslaughter as opposed to a DUI. Because it's the same. It's the same reflexes. It's the same impact on your brain. So sleep is critical. And hydration. What? Hydration? This is for real, right? Thank you for nodding your head, Kelly. I appreciate it. If you are dehydrated, you will have symptoms of dementia. The number one thing to do when you've got an older person in front of you who seems like they're not connecting the dots and you might be looking at dementia is give them a drink of water. Again, that goes back to if somebody's got mental health stuff, make sure they're seeing their primary care physician. Because sometimes dementia is dehydration. It masks. Right, go get a therapist. If you haven't got one, you should get one. Boy, are they great. We're really fun. My clients enjoy the heck out of me, even when I'm making them do hard stuff. Right? Mind, body, spirit. Be with the people who fulfill you. Be with the people who make you happy. Find your people. Do the things that make your heart happy. That's important too, right? Outside of practicing law, which is fulfilling. We wouldn't have gotten into it if we didn't think it was interesting and we weren't academic and we were intrigued from an intellectual perspective. Like we got into law for a reason and we're staying in law for a reason. We like it. But do the other stuff that makes your heart happy. Do those other things. It's important. Gratitude. That's my oncidium. That's my backyard. That's my oncidium. Isn't it cool? I had no idea she was going to do that. It was amazing. I came downstairs one morning and went, oh, I had no idea. There were no buds. And then all of a sudden I had this amazing thing and I enjoyed the heck out of it for several weeks. And now I'm really hoping I get it again next year. She's hanging up. I'm giving her care and love. I hope I get her again, right? What separates privilege from entitlement is gratitude. It is a great privilege for me to be able to deliver a lecture to you. I hope that you learned. I hope that you got something out of it. I know there were a couple of smiles, so at least I did that much. It's nice for me. I like this. This is one of these things that does keep my heart happy. I like to be able to share information with others. So I am very, very grateful to you all for staying and attending and listening and asking questions and interacting. It made my Friday afternoon really enjoyable, and so I thank you all very much. I'm happy to stick around for questions and probably invite people to have seconds for pizza and baked ziti. A number? A number for a CLE number? Yes, we have a CLE number. I will get it for you. Oh, my phone's upside down. Whee! Who wants to see how many tabs I have open on my computer? I'll tell you right now, your CLE number is 2307143 Nancy. I'll repeat it. All right, hopefully one of you gets jackpot. 2307143 Nancy. Yes.
I want to give one more round of applause. Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was awesome.